All right. Okay, this meeting will be recorded this evening and posted on our website after we've finished in the next day or two. So if you miss anything and you want to go back, go to our website. Thank you all for being here this evening. Those of you who are members, we appreciate your support. And if you're not a member and would like to visit our website, it's www.lagunacanyonconservancy.org. And, please think about joining us. So the past two meetings of LCC have been in person. For those of you that attended, in March, we had the Banning Ranch presentation. And then in February, we all were at LCAD for a presentation by the president of LCAD. So tonight we thought it would be a good way to communicate to as many people, as much information as possible about the Caltrans work out along Laguna Canyon Road. We've all seen it. We've all driven by it. We're not quite sure what's going on. And so we invited Hallie Jones and Penny Milne to talk to us this evening, since they monitor these events probably a lot more closely than we are able to. So first off, let me say that we want to make some announcements. The coming meeting in May will be at the Sawdust. Is Jackie Gallagher here?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to let Jackie unmute herself, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what's happening out with the Sawdust project. And then we're going to go to Bob Borthwick and then Ann Christoph. And then we'll go into introducing Hallie and her presentation. So Jackie, can you tell us about what's happening in May?
I can. Sorry, I can't get my camera to work. On May 25th from 5 to 7, we'll be having an open house at the Sawdust to preview phase 1 installation and the completion of that. And it's been a year now, and we're just going to invite everybody from all 5 of the nonprofits that have participated. So we'll be sending something out. I'm sorry, Jean.
Phase 1 of what?
Phase 1 of the Sawdust Native Habitat Pollinator Project. Sorry, thank you, Jean.
Watch for announcements. Okay. All right, Bob Borthwick, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Aliso Creek 50th anniversary?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, this happens to be the 50th year since the Aliso Creek, Saving the Aliso Creek project started in 1973. And I worked on that with about 20 other people. And there was a slide presentation that we made in 1974 to the Board of Supervisors to explain what we were trying to do in saving the creek, the Aliso Creek corridor from channelization and overdevelopment. So the slideshow went over well. We got a positive vote from the Board of Supervisors, and they went on to establish the Aliso Creek Corridor Specific Plan, which became the Bible for development of South County. That then became, and as a result of that, you could say we have Aliso and Wood Canyon Regional Park that sort of stemmed from that original vote by the Board of Supervisors. So I've had this slideshow for 50 years, and I was trying to figure out, do I throw this away or what do I do? And so I decided to have it digitized. Charles Michael Murray did that. And so it became about a 10-minute video. And my thought was give that video to the county so it could be on display at the visitor center. So when people come to walk Aliso Creek, they could see, what happened 50 years ago to make this happen. So just recently with the help of Scott Thomas and Barbara Norton, that got approved by the visitor center. So it's now in their computer, and they have a nice big flat screen TV there. So if anybody's down there and you want to look at it on a big screen, you can do that. And we had kind of the inauguration of that video last week. And I just invited a few people that were sort of closely connected to the original presentation. And there was about a dozen people. And so anyway, it was great. And Ron Yo was the primary person that was behind this project. He was the team leader. So now it's at the visitor center. It can be accessed there, but it's also on the Greenbelt website. And it's Gail said we can put it on the LCC website as well. I mean, the more people that see this, the better. It doesn't matter whether they see it on one website or the other, but it's good to promote citizen activists and give them hope that things can actually turn out well if you stick to it. So anyway, it'll be up on the LCC website soon. And it was a wonderful event last week. There was 3 of us that were primarily involved in the slide presentation to the county. The other 2 besides me are deceased. So one of them, John Petke, his wife came and his son. That was great. And Judith Hamburger was the other narrator on the show. And she's passed away. Her husband lives in the East Coast, but I was talking to him and he said, if you could invite John and Rosemary Boyd, they were our best friends when we lived in Laguna during the 70s. So luckily, I knew Rosemary and John, and so they came also representing Judith. So that's my story.
Well, thank you, Bob. While I think of it, 50 years seems to go by in a flash, doesn't it? We learned this weekend that we lost a fellow environmentalist of renown. Jean Watt passed away this weekend. She was a leader of so many organizations, a co-founder of, Friends of Harbors, Beaches and Parks, and she was 96. She did so much good in her lifetime. She leaves behind such good work, and it was sad to hear, but she was a wonderful person, in our community. So for those of you that may not have heard, she passed away this weekend.
Yeah,
So
stop polluting our Newport. Bob's report, he was talking about the visitor center. Those who may not know, they're at the end of Aliso Creek Road, and you go down Alma. I guess it's really on the Alicia Parkway. That entrance to the Aliso and Wood Canyon Wilderness Park has a visitor center now. Not quite as good as the Nick Center, but it has a center there with restrooms and stuff. So that's where the video can be seen.
Yeah, it's right on the creek too. So it's actually quite beautiful, the visitor center.
right. Okay, so Anne Christoph has something, I think, to share with us, information that will tie in nicely with tonight's presentation about Caltrans and Laguna Canyon. So Anne, if you would like to fill us all in on some things you're involved in that may be of interest to everybody.
Well, this has to do with the council agenda tomorrow night. There's an item there about the median plantings on Laguna Canyon Road from the festival grounds to Canyon Acres. And that's where there used to be lawn, and now there's mulch and weeds. And there's the bottle brush trees. And when Bob and I did the landscape and scenic highways documents for the city, starting in 2014 and finishing in 2017, we made recommendations about how the planting should be along Laguna Canyon Road in general, and then specifically that area. So we recommended that the bottle brush trees be removed and that there be natural shrubbery and low plantings in the medians, and that there be sycamores and oaks on the sides. So the idea of that was that there would be this canyon feeling with the tall native trees on the sides, and then this grassy or low median, because Caltrans would not allow us to plant large trees in that median. And I know that Bob Whalen and other council members were always trying to get sycamores and oaks planted in the median, and Caltrans always refuses to allow that. So that was our answer to that dilemma. However, things have happened since then. And one is that the trees
have
at
to
the
allow.
village entrance, is somebody,
This is Ann.
somebody's talking. The trees at the village entrance have been planted. The landscaping has been mostly completed there. But many more mature trees than we expected were removed by the city in the process of that installation. So there are a number of tall eucalyptus that are missing, and a primrose tree that's missing, and juniper trees that they removed contrary to our recommendations. So even though there's new young trees that are thriving, it still is less treed than it used to be. The other thing is that the flood control channel construction is underway, and the county removed all the trees that were along that whole stretch by the sawdust and the frontage road. So the present proposal for tomorrow night says that they want to add some Catalina cherries and red buds to the median where it was going to be just low plantings, and that they would go ahead and remove all the bottle brush. So I wrote a memo.
Don't punch anything, sweetie.
I just want to get the sound back.
Okay.
Well, you can,
Please do not speak when others are speaking. And continue.
Okay. So I'm in my memo, I'm recommending that they don't decide this right now, that they think through this a little more, because if we're not going to be able to plant large trees on the side, and then we remove these trees in the median, there's just going to be more barrenness and no plan for making it better. So that's the situation that we're in right now. And the landscape and scenic highways plan talks about planting smaller trees, native trees like elderberry and toyons, and the redbud and the Catalina cherry are native to the state of California, but not native to Laguna Beach. And so that's another factor. Another factor is that the curbs on the median are not in good shape. They have repaved Laguna Canyon Road so many times that the asphalt is up much higher on the curbs than it should be. So in some places, the curbs may be 2 or 3 inches tall instead of 6 or 8 inches tall. So at some point, that's going to have to be fixed, at which time whatever landscaping they put could get further disturbed. So it seemed to me that all these issues should be talked about a little more, and that the curbs should be fixed before we landscape further. That was my personal memo, but I think organizations should weigh in on what their thoughts are.
All right, thank you,
We
Ann,
need
for
to
that.
ask Marion Jacobs to make sure she's muted. We've got it on speaker view, and Marion, your name keeps on popping up like there's sound coming from you.
There, thank you, Marion. So
Ann,
thank you, Ann, for that. And if we I think tomorrow we could maybe speak in support of your memo to the council, Anne, and ask for them to be more, thoughtful in this process before making decisions, perhaps. That might be the best way to go at this point. So if you have,
Dora's got her hand up.
Could I just ask a question? Excuse me. So
Sure.
I've pulled up the staff report on this, and I just have a question for Anne about, I guess this went to planning. And then this is just, this agenda item for tomorrow night is approving what the planning commission has already sent to them. So it says staff is returning the revised landscape plan for city council consideration. It is recommended that the city council adopt the attached resolution approving design review 230456, which would amend the initially approved landscape plan DR 172506 to add 109 trees for a net increase of 42 trees. All other plant materials would remain the same and are consistent with the objectives of the landscape and scenic highways resource document. If the city council denies DR 230456, staff could proceed with the median landscaping approval in DR 172506, which would result in no trees in the medians. So does that, so if we ask them to wait, beautification is going to speak tomorrow night and support everything that Ann just said. But if we're just asking them to wait, does that mean that they're just going to move forward with something else and not have any trees in the median? Just
They could,
tips, I
mean,
guess.
unless the council tells them to put this project on hold until these issues are resolved.
And specifically not, you revert to the other no trees in the medians.
Right.
Okay. I'll make some notes for council.
I don't know. It's a tough thing because we're not being allowed to do what we really want to do.
Right.
And so we have to work around that in some ways. And perhaps there are some places on the sides of the roads where we can plant those tall trees that isn't out of Caltrans jurisdiction, like maybe the Edison place frontage. I don't know, but
can I ask people to put their questions in chat, Johanna? And we can come back to this perhaps later in the presentation. I'd like to move ahead.
I just wanted to make a comment if I could. About,
Okay.
I'm sorry. Tony probably knows this better than I do, but at one time she discovered that if the I can't think of the word now. The curbs are higher, we could plant larger trees.
Yes, but let's discuss this after the presentation.
Okay. All right. Well, I think if maybe Anne can put anything in chat, and I see Ruben is also contributing, like we could come back to this. So, all right. So this evening's presentation was to be Penny Milne of Can Do and Hallie Jones. Penny is not feeling well this evening and can't join us. So Hallie is going to be doing the presentation alone, and there's probably no need to tell you about Hallie, except we know she's born and bred and she's got Laguna in her blood. She's been a very, very good leader, an executive director of Laguna Canyon Foundation for us. She really watches out and contributes to the mission, along with what our mission is for preserving the canyons. So Hallie, we appreciate your being here and taking this on yourself. So please, and anyone who has a question, put it in chat and we'll come back to that after the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a
Hallie,
little,
Hallie, let me mute everyone and please unmute yourself.
sure.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that, Jean, because it is distracting when there's background noise from people. Thank you guys for having me here tonight. I always love catching up with you and hearing what's going on. Certainly missing Penny tonight. She is my partner in crime on this stuff and just, so incredibly smart and up to speed on things. So you guys are just going to have to bear with me a little bit without her. But she did collaborate with me on the PowerPoint. So, you got a little of Penny's brain in here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. It's always a little challenging with a PowerPoint. So I'm going to cross my fingers. This shows you guys the right thing. Are you seeing my PowerPoint?
I can see it.
Perfect. Okay, good. All right. So I wanted to just start with quick status, where we are. And I think one of the most important takeaways from this entire process for me has been really the power of people, the power of community, and our ability to make change. It feels like it was, 100 years ago when we started these conversations with Caltrans. We had public meetings, we talked to them over and over and over again. And I think we as the environmental community did an incredible job of being unified in our messaging. We had people who were maybe a little bit more strident over here and people who were maybe a little more flexible over here. And that rainbow really helped us be successful with Caltrans. It's hard to remember that when we're seeing such devastation, quite frankly, happen with the construction. So, every time I drive past it, I just have to remind myself, like, wait, this is a win. Remember, this is a win, even though it's hard to see. So, I'm going to start with a little bit of kind of, how we got where we are. And then I want to remind us all of what the project was initially going to be and what we were initially so concerned about. So we were really clear with Caltrans about what our concerns were, what we did and did not want to see for this project. And Hallie School actually then entered into litigation with Caltrans. And quite frankly, I think that was the big hammer that forced Caltrans to change some aspects of the project. As part of that legal settlement, which Laguna Canyon Foundation was not part of, there were decisions and negotiations and deals struck between Caltrans and Hallie. So a lot of the information that we're getting, a lot of what's happening is actually a result of that settlement. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Obviously, construction started. What you're seeing out there right now, that orange fencing, is what's known as ESHA fencing. It's the environmentally sensitive habitat area fencing. And basically what that fencing does is it signifies to these construction crews, don't touch anything past this fence. So anything that is between the road and the orange fence, there might be temporary impacts, there might be permanent impacts, but it just means anything beyond that cannot be impacted at all, even temporarily. You can't, drop a load of sandbags out there. You can't do anything in that area beyond that orange fencing. So that's what you're looking at, that bright orange fencing. It's really a standard tool in these big construction projects. You have biologists who go out and flag everything and install the ESHA fencing. So let's remember what the project initially was. You had going outbound, extending that second outbound lane from El Toro Road by an additional 1,200 feet, an 8-foot shoulder and bike lane, and 19 utility poles. We're going to go down and be undergrounded between El Toro Road and the 73. On the inbound side, the southbound side, that second inbound lane was going to be extended by 900 feet total. So you would have had 1,700 feet south of El Toro of 2 lanes, also an 8-foot shoulder and bike lane, and then taking that natural drainage, that stream, and turning it into a articulated concrete block channel. Remember that that articulated block, the use of the articulated block, that in and of itself was a win, because initially they wanted to have a concrete line channel. It was just going to be a giant storm drain. Okay. So just to remind us all, when we look at that outbound extension, right, and when I say we, I'll just speak for Laguna Canyon Foundation. We believe that that outbound lane, you could extend that second outbound lane without significant environmental impact. In addition to that 8-foot shoulder and bike lane, we thought that was a good idea, right? Now, remember, none of this is south of El Toro Road. This is all north of El Toro Road. So just nothing touched on the 133 south of El Toro. This is a part of the project that's moving forward. They are going to underground those utility lines. It's my understanding that those utility lines are going to be undergrounded now only on the south side under the bike lane. One of the things that I did not like about their design of this is they're going to have very large maintenance pullouts. And unfortunately, we did not get Caltrans to agree not to do those pullouts. That's one of their safety standards. But those pullouts are going to be DG or dirt, and they will be hydroseeded with native plants, which is way better, again, than additional asphalt. In terms of bike safety, the bike lane, so you're going to have an inbound bike lane, you're going to have an outbound bike lane. Both of those are going to have a 2-foot painted strip, and they're going to consider putting rumble strips along those bike lanes. So that I think will help improve bicycle safety on that area. So this is just the schematic. This is the initial schematic that they put together. And this is what it's going to look like. You're going to have 2 outbound lanes. You're going to have a class 2 8-foot shoulder and bike lane. Instead of these utilities being over here, they've moved the utilities over to this section. This is the part of the project that I was personally most upset and concerned about for a few different reasons. One of the, I don't know that it's logical, but for me, it's important that we draw a line in the sand and tell Caltrans, basically, you can't touch this part of our canyon. They've done a lot of work north of El Toro Road. It feels like a freeway out there now. And I think I'm very proud of the fact that we were able to keep them from doing any widening or extending of the road south of El Toro Road. And I think that's just an important goal for us to continue to keep in mind. All of these things will come up again. Caltrans is like, a very insidious beast, and new projects will come up, and they will, have different ideas. And, I think it's important that we stick to our guns on this one. So this is what was initially proposed. You'll remember it was going to be this existing traffic lane, the additional lane, an 8-foot bike lane, which would have required them to cut into that slope right between the Willow parking lot and El Toro Road. Initially, they wanted to put in a 10-foot retaining wall along that entire section of road. Remember that. That would have been terrible, terrible. We were able to get them to say, okay, we're not going to put in a 10-foot retaining wall. We can just engineer the slope, right? Now, that slope, 1.5 to 1, 40 feet into the park, that slope would have looked very similar, in my opinion, to what you see across from the Sawdust Festival. Sheer cliff, and you've got, I don't even know what it's called, but that chain that's up there to prevent rock slides, that would not have been a restored, beautiful native slope any longer. We would have lost 14 huge oak trees and that rock face, that really iconic rock face when you drive past Annalee School, but on the inbound side, that would have gone as well. So we were absolutely horrified by that idea. The other thing that was very concerning, you'll remember, is now this is a graphic that shows traffic coming in and out of the Willow parking lot. So now you would have had to cross 2 lanes of inbound traffic if you wanted to get out of the Willow parking lot. So what that means is basically they either put another stoplight at the Willow parking lot, or all of a sudden that becomes a no left turn. And people who want to come out of the Willow parking lot are going to be making illegal left turns or illegal U-turns because I don't think they're going to drive all the way down to Canyon Acres to be able to make a U-turn. So that, I felt like the traffic analysis they did was insufficient. They weren't looking at what that really looked like. And I thought that was going to be extraordinarily dangerous and problematic. I'm sorry, my cat has decided that he wants to join the Zoom. Okay. So great news, as I mentioned, they're not doing that. They're not touching the 133 south of El Toro Road. So pat yourselves on the back. That was absolutely our collective win. And without our efforts, we wouldn't have won. We wouldn't have won that battle. The reason that they don't need to do that is because they're installing a new driveway for Annalise. So this is what you see when you turn on El Toro Road. You see a big new driveway. That driveway is going to be owned by, it's my understanding it's going to be owned by the city and held, there's going to be an easement held by Annalise for access to it. So what that means is that this drive, the existing driveway that's on the 133, you're not going to be able to turn left into that driveway or left out of that driveway. And what that will do is it'll help prevent that backup of inbound left turners that you see at near that El Toro intersection. So Annalise might decide to abandon that driveway on the 133. That's going to be their choice and only use this new driveway. Either way, this driveway, the new driveway that's going to be on El Toro Road will be right-hand turn in, right-hand turn out. So you will have to, no, there's going to have to be, I'm sorry, I'm mistaken about that. This needs to be, you can turn left into this driveway, but you can only turn right coming out of this driveway. So this is the new design for the new driveway for Annalise. It's going to be asphalt. It's very wide. If you've looked at it, it's, I think, 30 feet wide. It's disappointing to me that it's asphalt. Quite frankly, I would much rather be DG, but I do understand the safety concerns of turning from a relatively high speed road onto a dirt road, you know, and the required decrease in speed and traffic safety. Excuse me. Here's the part that I don't like about this driveway. It will have a 6-foot tall chain link fence on both sides from the 133 all the way down. Apparently, that specific language, 6-foot tall chain link fence, was included in the legal settlement between Annalise and Caltrans. I don't know why, I don't know how, and quite frankly, this is what I've heard. I haven't seen that language myself. But Caltrans is telling us very, very clearly they must install that fencing. They have no other option, which is really disappointing to me because not only is it visually extraordinarily unattractive, it's also, in my opinion, problematic for wildlife because you cannot have, free movement of large mammals, over a 6-foot chain link fence. You just can't do that. So what Caltrans is suggesting, and it sounds crazy, but our tax dollars at work, is to let them go ahead and install the fencing. They're gonna do that. They're gonna install 6-foot tall chain link fencing. Then perhaps we can work with the stakeholders to get that fencing removed and some rustic split rail fencing added afterwards. Caltrans has agreed to do the rustic split rail fencing along the 133, which is a much better option than the 6-foot tall chain link. So my hope is that we'll be able to come to some agreement to basically remove that the new fence as soon as it's put up and Caltrans signs off on the project and put in a fence that we support a little bit more. So this to me is the most heartbreaking part of this project. That little stream that ran along Laguna Canyon Road is absolutely a riparian corridor. And Caltrans didn't like that because what that meant, they had to keep it clear for water drainage, right? So that, if in periods of heavy rain, water could move freely through that. It's very complex, difficult to get permission from the wildlife agencies to clear riparian vegetation, right? Because the wildlife agencies understand how endangered the riparian habitat is. So in the just absolutely weirdest and most terrible quirk of environmental law, Caltrans decided it was better to just eliminate that habitat altogether, figure out mitigation plan, and then they wouldn't have to worry about getting permits to clear it every single year. So it's the way things work, but it's really disappointing. So this corridor, as I mentioned, initially it was going to be solid concrete. It was going to be a storm drain. And because of our efforts, it's not going to be that. It's going to be articulated concrete block. It's way better than concrete. And they do say that they're going to hydroseed it with native grasses. I don't anticipate that being successful at all. I anticipate it'll be, a weed corridor that they're then able to, mow with weed whackers whenever they need to. But certainly from a water resource perspective, having, a permeable surface in that area is way better than having plain concrete. So really, really hard to see that riparian habitat disappear. It doesn't make sense to me that a wildlife agency would say, oh yeah, there's so little of this habitat here that you can't mitigate it. And so you can just take it out. Like it doesn't make sense to me, but it's the way the wildlife agencies work and environmental law in California. So this is what the, again, this is a graphic from the initial plan. This is the articulated block that they're going to be using. And, like I said, my opinion is going to turn into a big weed channel of invasive grasses, not going to be healthy native habitat, better than it would have been if it was concrete. So one of the most important things about this whole project that we discussed, back when the project was initially proposed, is how they were going to mitigate for their construction impacts. So obviously, anytime you impact sensitive habitat, you're required by law and by the wildlife agencies to mitigate for that impact. By far, the best way to do that is to mitigate on site. If you're going to cut down an oak tree, you plant another one 10 feet away, right? That's absolutely the best way to do that. That is not always possible, particularly when you're talking about habitat like riparian habitat, because riparian habitat will only grow in creeks and rivers. And if you don't have creeks and rivers nearby, it gets really hard to mitigate that. So mixed bag on this. We wanted them to do on-site mitigation for the riparian habitat, and the wildlife agency said no, there's not enough space to mitigate for riparian habitat here. But the oak impacts, well, those will be mitigated on site and in Laurel Canyon. So that's good news. It means that they're going to have to plant oaks and keep those oaks alive at a very high ratio. It depends on the individual tree, but up to 20-to-1 is the mitigation ratio that they've been given. So 20 oak trees for impacting one. So that I think is tolerable. I believe that the riparian mitigation will be buying credits in a mitigation bank, which is exactly what we did not want to see happen. It basically just means that they give a bunch of money to someone else who's going to be doing riparian restoration elsewhere. Not what we wanted to see. And I'm disappointed in that. One of the really good things about this, however, is that they have committed to doing remedial native planting along El Toro Road and along the 133 with a really good selection of locally sourced native plants. What is good about that, obviously, is that we're going to have additional native cover. The reason that they're calling it remedial planting and not mitigation is that they don't have the same success criteria for remedial planting, right? So they can just plant plants and walk away, rather than a mitigation plan where they actually have to make sure that those plants survive for a certain number of years. So good that we're going to have more native plants. Are they really going to make it? Who's really going to be taking care of them? That will remain to be seen. So we're still trying to figure this out. Who owns now that corner? Who owns the corner of El Toro Road and the 133? I don't know. I'm not sure. So that's going to be really interesting. We're looking to figure that out right now. Could be Caltrans, could be county, could be city. How are we gonna fix that chain link issue? I think that's one of those things that, you know, if we don't fix it now, 20 years from now, it's gonna be invisible to most people. So I think it's important to strike while the iron's hot on that. But I think, you know, at one of my recent board meetings, we had a conversation about this. And one of my board members said, well, what are your lessons learned? What are your lessons learned here? And it's hard for me to think about that because I do think overall we were successful. We were successful. It's not the project that I wanted to see, but it's much better than it was. But I do think it's important for us to look at like, okay, what can we learn from this? I think the biggest, and I know I sound like a broken record, but my biggest thing is we did a great job. We collectively, this group of people did a great job. And I think it is so important for us to carry that momentum forward into the next project, right? We learned how to do this. Well, I'm not going to say that because you guys probably already knew how to do this. I didn't know how to do this. So I think it's really important for us to be able to carry that momentum and that very coordinated approach into the next project, because there will be a next project. I also think that I was, quite frankly, shocked when the construction started. And part of that is a little bit of, we had a global pandemic, kind of, distracted by other things. But also there was a point where Caltrans got their final environmental documents, right? That's what NEPA and CEQA refers to, are federal and state environmental documents. And those documents said, no further public input or review of plans is necessary. I should have caught that and raised my hand and said, no, you guys need to keep talking to us. So that's I think a good lesson learned for all of us, right? Never take your eye off the ball. I'm giving myself a little bit of a break on that, given the fact that we were in a global pandemic, but still, it's a good lesson learned. But I don't want that to take away from the successful impact that we did have and how successfully we worked together. I thought that was really powerful and really fun, quite frankly. I mentioned in here the Laguna Canyon Road undergrounding, the undergrounding of power poles in Laguna Canyon Road. That's going to be a big project. And talk about something we're going to need to be unified on, right? That's going to be something that we all need to work together on. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of noise and not a lot of impact. That's all that I have. So if you guys have any questions, there's some questions in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Okay, Hallie, I have a few questions in chat. One is from Johanna Felder. Will there be U-turns on Laguna Canyon Road coming into town and out of town?
It's my understanding that there will be U-turns allowed at the intersection of El Toro and the 133 heading outbound. So if you come out of that Annalise driveway and you turn right and you want to head back into Laguna, I believe you're going to be able to make a U-turn at El Toro Road. I don't know if there's going to be a U-turn outbound.
Okay. All right, we have a question from Ann Christoph. The corner of 133 and El Toro, Laguna Coast Fire Safe Council got state funding for innovative fuel mod program in that area with cooperation of the OC Fire Authority and OC Parks. That is supposed to be providing protection for the Annalise School. What happens with that?
That's a great question, Anne. It's a beautiful, beautiful little parcel. It is absolutely still protected. I know that. I just don't know who is responsible for making sure that it maintains that same level of, fire safety planting.
Yeah, Annalise is supposed to be maintaining the I think it's the first 75 feet. And, and the county is supposed to be maintaining the next two zones. So Annalise is responsible for zones A and B. And the county is responsible for zones C and D. But that maintenance has been somewhat lacking over the years, despite many reminders from me.
Right. And, I'm not sure now if the property has changed hands, who then, who's going to be responsible for that. So I think that's definitely something that we need to continue to keep our eyes on.
Yeah, David Horn was involved in this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it's a shame to have all that state funding go to waste. And that whole program, which was a much more natural oriented fuel mod program than anywhere else. I was hoping that would be a demonstration project that would prove that we could use native plants as part of a fuel mod program. But because Annalise didn't keep the same contractor on, we had Nakai working on it, who did a stellar job, and they were maintaining it perfectly. They weren't kept on. And so that's when the maintenance started to falter.
Absolutely. Fuel mod projects are 100% dependent on their maintenance.
Wasn't it also supposed to be a little bit of a flood control planting area too, if I remember correctly, Anne?
Well, there's a stream on the, it would be the south side of the new driveway. There is a stream there. That wasn't part of our project. There was also a historic site there, the original well that served Laguna Beach, and the remains of that. I don't know what happened to that, but we were very careful about staying away from that.
Okay, Mary Fagris has an additional question. I can let Mary ask her question, or people can see it in chat.
It's not really a question, but when the undergrounding, et cetera, of that other stretch of Laguna Canyon Road first came up, I contacted the city to make sure that the Coastal Greenbelt Authority would be able to have a staff member make presentations at a public hearing at our meetings. I didn't get a real positive response, but I think I finally have pressured enough so that when the time comes, they will send a staff member and we'll have it as an agenda item and it'll be a public meeting. I think the more types of public meetings that are held for this is important. And Alex has just put in, he'll follow up with the staff about this issue. Yeah, the unknown is always the worst thing. And that's what happened to us with this project on Laguna Canyon Road. Our last hearing with Caltrans in 2019 was marvelous. They presented all this information. We accomplished so much, as Hallie said, changing huge things that would have been just awful for our very special site there. So we need to be doing the same thing with this next stretch too. So look for more CGA meeting notices and we'll do our best to keep it going.
Okay, Bob Borthwick's had his hand up, and then we'll come back to John Hamill's question.
Sorry, couldn't find my icon. I was on a couple of Zoom meetings with Caltrans and Annalise a few months ago. And so one of the things that the way I understood it from Annalise's standpoint is that the existing driveway out onto Laguna Canyon Road would stay and it would be right turn only and both outbound. So in other words, people that live in Irvine would go out that existing driveway and go north to Irvine. People that live in town would turn right into Annalise to the school, but in leaving the school to go back into town, they would have to go out the new driveway, turn left at El Toro Road, and then go back into town. Because the question of U-turn at the intersection there is an interesting one, because in effect, the existing merging left turn lane is going away. That's becoming the extension from the northbound. So there is no more way, there's no way to turn out of Annalise and merge and then go back into town. So I'm wondering if there could be a U-turn at the intersection where the signal is if there's no left turn lane. So I asked Caltrans project manager that question. She said, well, we'll have to think that one through or something like that. But anyway, I'm not sure everything is 100% solidified. But again, my understanding is that the Annalise driveway would stay intact. But as I said, only for right turn from people coming from town and right turn leaving for people going to Irvine. Other than that, there's no merging lane or no left turn lane, so there's no other way to get in now. Which necessitates, of course, the new driveway.
Yeah, that makes sense, Bob.
And I do see, excuse me, I'm sorry, I did see the actual plans as part of these Zoom meetings, and the 6-foot chain link fence was definitely on that plan. And I brought that up, like, who approved that? And Caltrans inferred that the county had approved it, but they didn't say who at the county or what department, but they said the county had approved it. And they also said that the driveway will be fee ownership by Annalise. It won't be owned by the city. It'll be owned by Annalise. And I do remember those things at those meetings.
That's good to know.
There's a question.
Go ahead.
There's a question regarding the chain link fenced area, which I'm sure we all support getting rid of that, but is it going to interfere with the existing floodplain in some way? Can you tell us if that's?
I don't anticipate that. I think that the driveway is going to have more impact on the floodplain than the fence, particularly if we can get it taken out pretty quickly. Obviously, if you had, any kind of debris coming across that road, you might then all of a sudden have issues. I don't know is the answer to my question. I don't think so, but maybe that's because I view it as a very temporary obstacle.
Okay, so the Annalise driveway, okay, is it correct that the elimination of the inbound lane protected the Laguna Coast Wilderness Park, but cars coming into town cannot turn left into Annalise's school? So how are they going to get into Annalise if they're coming in from the 133? Are they going to have to turn onto left on El Toro and then into the new driveway?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you see,
The thing that I'm trying to bring up there, Hallie.
Yeah.
Number one, I'm Hallie. I'm trying to not call it 133. I want to call it Laguna Canyon Road. But so I just want to object each and every time. But I think that the land swap between the city and the county was quite a plus. And could you explain that?
It sounds like you know more about it than I do, Gene, because I've been trying to figure that out.
Well, I just know that it happened. That's all. But the thing is that apparently the reason why they had to go into removing all the oak trees from the Laguna Coast Wilderness Park and shave down the rock outcroppings was because they needed an extra lane. But there was a lane right in the middle. And that was a lane for people coming into town who turned left into Annalise School. If you made that lane a regular traffic lane, then you didn't need the lane going in front of the Willows parking lot. And so there was quite a negotiation between a land swap between the city and the county to provide that. Maybe Tony Eisman can tell us what happened. Tony, how did that happen?
I don't know if this is going to answer your question or not, but I had commuted for 35 years out Laguna Canyon Road, and there was a dramatic change in traffic when there was that left turn for inbound cars going, let's say from Irvine, dropping their children off. And what happened was, you know, Laguna people are so polite. They just kept waiting and waiting and letting people go in, and you'd lose 2 or 3 traffic cycles. And it would be backed up for a mile trying to get through El Toro Road. And it became evident that the solution was to take absolutely anybody coming in cannot go left into Annalise. They had to take a left at El Toro and then take a right into Annalise. That completely eliminated that issue of how polite we are and when we let people in, regardless of how it's impacting behind. Now, I think this has achieved it, and the parents were also interested. The other possibility also is exiting I'll call it going back to Irvine, exiting Annalise. They can go right and then pick up the toll road for free for that short segment and get back on the Canyon Road.
Yep.
Which
Easily.
may be something that it would be great if they would decide that's what they wanted to do, and maybe that could be part of an orientation for new parents to do something like that. Now, Jean go ahead.
I have to say, I heard a presentation at Can by Caltrans, by the engineers. And I left that meeting more confused than ever about traffic flow and patterns. I mean, I'm not sure that they know exactly how cars are going to be moving. So, you know, I mean, I hear all of these things, and it's going to be no left turn and then this left turn and then that, you know, and I think we're just going to have to wait and see, quite frankly. And I think it's going to change because they're going to decide to do it one way, and then everyone's going to say, oh, this is not working. And then they're going to want to do it a different way. I mean, I think this is not going to be a perfect, smooth transition. Let me put it that way.
Parents were agreeable to spend the additional money to create this. So they, I think, were in agreement that this made sense. So if we've got the city and Annalise wanting something, I think maybe we could, you know, be, and I'd come out of hiding if there were a meeting and I'd go talk about it.
That would be amazing. And I think, I mean, going back to the chain link fence, I think that's exactly what we're going to need to do.
Okay, so we have a comment from Dorothy. And it says that is an important wildlife crossing area, and a fence will help protect wildlife. The fence should be 10 feet tall. Perhaps they could use the brown fencing that blends in better. I'm not quite sure that that's true. What do you think, Hallie?
I think the fencing as proposed along the Annalise driveway, that is not where I'm concerned about roadkill mortality. Certainly, you know, animals that run across Laguna Canyon Road or El Toro Road, we see that all the time. It's tragic. But the fence that we're talking about, this 6-foot chain link fence on both sides of the Annalise driveway, I don't see that making a difference in decreasing wildlife mortality.
Okay, I don't see anyone's hands raised. Does anyone have another question they'd like to raise their hand and ask? All right, I have a comment on maybe, Hallie, we talk about, you know, we all talk about Caltrans. These are like faceless, nameless entities. And we're told Caltrans says this, Caltrans says that. How can we actually get a person, a name and a contact of people at Caltrans directly responsible for what's going on in Laguna Canyon that we can communicate with and make sure they understand we're concerned? And there's a lot of us that are concerned. Any
Very
idea?
good question. Now, there is one woman who's a project manager for this project. Her name is Barbara McGahey.
Right.
Many of you guys know her. Many of you have heard her speak. She's a lovely human being and incredibly patient with me. And when you ask Barbara a question, hey, Barbara, what's the mitigation ratio of the oaks, right? It's going to take her 4 layers of people to figure that out because their team is so huge. In addition, every time a new project comes up, we're gonna have a new project manager. There is not one person at Caltrans responsible for all things Laguna Canyon Road related. I wish that there was, but I'll be frank, Barbara's responsive. She gets back to you. She's the person that I'm gonna call if I have a question. She'll figure out who I need to talk to. But it is such an incredibly large agency. It's very hard to work with them. And they kind of want it that way, right? Because they have a mandate. They have a mandate to make people go places faster and more safely. And that is not my mandate. I don't care if it takes me an extra 10 minutes to drive down the canyon. Yes, Mary.
I'll add on to that a little bit. Barbara was very helpful. The number of presentations that Caltrans did at the Coastal Greenbelt Authority meetings. And at that last one in 2019, she promised they would come back. And we have not seen them since. We did send the Coastal Greenbelt Authority approved sending a letter to them at one of our this year meetings. As far as I know, there's been absolutely no response to that letter. And I think it's this lack of communication with the public that's made it so difficult when they actually started the construction. It was like something's happening that we didn't really understand was going to be happening this way. And communication goes a long ways. And we all know how important that is. And anything else that happens on Laguna Canyon Road, I think we've learned our lesson here. Let's communicate all we can, all sides talking about it.
Yeah,
But
I definitely
think,
agree with you.
I'm sorry, Hallie, I think Katrina Foley is the person that we should lobby.
I think Caltrans only wants to communicate the bare minimum, right? They want to do the bare minimum they need to do to get their permits through, right? So once they had those permits, they were done. They were done. And I do think, with good relationships, we could have asked Barbara, hey, we noticed you got your latest, documentation. We think it's time for you to come back and give another presentation. And, I think that they would have. But even when they come back to give the presentations, right? I mean, you have conversations like this, and you're talking to one person and you have a question about the U-turns, but the person that is there is in charge of the, oak woodland mitigation and knows nothing about the U-turns. But then if the person who knows about the U-turns is there, then the person who's in charge, it is really difficult because they're very complicated. These projects are very complicated. And one of the things that we don't have, and would be great if we did, is a funded CEQA expert, right? Like somebody on one of our organizations whose job it was to review these documents all day long. Personally, I would rather chew off my own arm than have that job. I mean, I can't even make it through like the first 5 pages of these documents, but there are people who do that, right? And I think that would be really valuable.
I attended the city council town hall meeting this past Saturday. Our state senator Janet Nguyen is actually, one of her responsibilities is the California Department of Transportation and Caltrans. So it might be Janet Nguyen who is the person we have to lobby to get some attention for us. And so maybe we'll start with her and ask for more involvement. She's actually going to be back in town this Friday. I will ask her. I'm going to another meeting with her this coming Friday. So I want to circle back.
Just a little note though, Gail, on that.
Yes.
We have learned working on the wildlife corridor connection that our Caltrans District 5 is not quite in step with the rest of the districts throughout the state, not as environmentally sensitive, aware, and ready to work a little bit more than some of the other districts. So just keep that in mind as you talk with the senator.
Oh, shouldn't we change that?
We would love to change it. Yes, of course.
I perpetuate that.
Yes.
I mean, okay.
I think to your point, Gail, and it's a really good one. I think we need to start at that level. And I think our ask is not a project specific ask. It's not even a communication ask, right? It is a request that these agencies recognize Laguna Canyon Road for what an incredibly special segment of road it is. That's all, and I think that level, like the 30,000-foot view, I think those are the conversations we need to be having at that level, right? Because when you start changing agencies' perception of the infrastructure, then all of a sudden, a 2-lane freeway is not even an option, right? Because there is now a culture shift around what this road means. And, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what the city does in terms of taking over ownership of Laguna Canyon Road. Are they going to do that? Are we not? I'm not sure what the status is on that, but I think that's a really an important thing for us to look at, right? Is figuring out how we're going to make sure that this road is treated as special as it really is. And that's kind of my point about the line in the sand at El Toro Road, right? I mean, it's late and it's probably time for me to have a glass of wine, but I already feel like they ruined the rest of it. Like, I don't want them to ruin this part of it too.
Okay, I would like to just, as we're nearing the end, circle back to what we started with the medians, which along Laguna Canyon Road. I mean, we lost the trees in front of the sawdust. We felt really bad. Now we're losing the medians, which are actually becoming almost level with the street, as we all know. So I would like to go back to Ruben Flores's comment about, because tomorrow night there is a city council meeting on this issue. They say tree for tree, expect they are removing big trees and replacing with small trees. Each time a large tree is removed, we should fight for another large tree planted somewhere within 200 feet. We found out the day labor area is Laguna property, a good place to add some large trees on the left. The power station in the canyon is a good place to plant some big trees. So if we can do this to replace what we've already lost and add to Laguna Canyon Road, I think we need to raise the city's awareness and listen. I do think that we need to have more interaction with the city about this. So any comments anyone would like to make about that? Maybe Ruben, you'd like to add to what your comment in chat was?
Yeah, we are losing more and more trees. Ann and I tried to fight for a couple trees in the village entrance that got taken down. And remember, each time a large eucalyptus falls, they're not being replaced. So what they are replacing it with is non-California, non-Orange County, but California native trees. So we're replacing them with almost large shrubs. So what we need to do is find those locations where we can put some large trees. And every time we say okay to a plan that doesn't allow for that, we're allowing for a permanent restructuring of the canopy of our town. Every time we say, and we pretend like it's a 1-for-1, but it's not. It's a huge 80-foot eucalyptus, or as Hallie says, the large oaks. And then they're going to replace them with, something smaller. And that's not a replacement, that's an excuse. So we need to look to where we can continue to find those nooks and crannies for the large trees, or we'll lose some of our habitat. We'll lose some of our birds. And it's this group here that's going to make that difference. Because when you go to city council and people say, oh, well, we're going to trade this tree for that tree, and everybody in the room says, sounds wonderful, how great, and the rest of us get sad. So that needs to be something that we're pushing for. Thank you.
Okay, so, and Christoph, is there one, encouragement for tomorrow evening, what you'd like to see happen after, tonight's comments?
Well, I'd like to see people speak tomorrow night about the points that I was mentioning. And if people have more things to say, like what Ruben suggested of places where we can put these large trees. And that the city should have a program to implement the total picture. And that's what's lacking here. So they should fix the medians, get the curbs right, do this comprehensive plan of replanting, and then come back and decide what's the best treatment for those medians. I agree that those callistemons are really, most of them, not very attractive. But we can't just tear them out and then hope that everything else is going to be okay.
Okay, thank you, Ann. So as a last reminder, we all have to be aware, especially when Laguna Canyon Road undergrounding, that project really, really gets going. We must pay attention. Maybe we should have some meetings about this with all the groups that are concerned, because that's going to be really impactful on Laguna Canyon, as we all know. So, well,
Gail, the one thing that Can Do did show at the Can Do meeting where Caltrans made the presentation, it was a bunch of nothing, except they had a timeline. And it was interesting that all this work they planned to do from 11 o'clock at night to 5 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And then they turned it over to Southern California Edison to do the undergrounding, which will take a year. So the Caltrans will do a bunch of work over the next 6 months. Then the next year will be Southern California Edison. Then Caltrans will come in and finish the project. And they say basically they will not close down Laguna Canyon Road. They will do basically all the work at night.
well, that's how they operate all the time, isn't it? So, all right,
So
well,
this is only the undergrounding that is north of El Toro Road that you're talking about, right?
Yes, just between El Toro Road and the toll road. But it's 19 poles. And I guess if there's an evacuation, one pole will fall and block the whole thing. So there'll be 19 less chances.
The proposal that the city council was looking at as part of the undergrounding of the rest of Laguna Canyon Road into town was really frightening. To widen it, put in a mass transit lane and a giant bike lane on the Alcad side of the road. I mean, it would make Laguna Canyon Road look like a freeway.
Well, I don't want to say this because we're recording this, but I guess the city council meeting was recorded. They said they asked for an HOV, reversible HOV lane in the center because it would help get funding. And after they get the grant, then they wouldn't do it.
okay.
I heard that also.
I don't make this crap up.
Well, thank you for
I
your
heard
comment.
it too.
Actually, I heard it too, the HOV lane. Those are very popular on bridges and cities and tunnels. Yeah, so why not bring it to Laguna Canyon Road? So, okay, well, with that, I think I just want to remind people that we'll send out our notices about what's coming up in the next month or two. And please watch for notices. We'll try and be a communications link for some of these things that we discussed this evening. And I want to thank Hallie so much for her time in the presentation. It was great. It was clear.
Let's
And
ask everybody to unmute themselves and let's hear it for Hallie Jones.
Yay,
You guys don't need to do that.
Yay.
I
That's our
just,
girl.
I feel bad you just got me and not Penny. I just am
And
gonna
Penny,
apologize
yay.
for that.
no, you want Penny to feel better? We'll get her another time. Thank you. for
Good, good.
attending.
We'll give her a nickel.
Good night, everybody, and thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Gail.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Gail.
Raise your hand if you have a question.
Sing Old Man River.
Sounded like Johanna.
I just test the sound system that way.
We're off, but I'm not sure. You never know when these things are still running in some other strange place. Well, I thought that was very interesting.